Hello and welcome to another episode of a weekly waypoint. Today we are playing Wipeout Pulse, which was originally going to be the endpoint of our Wipeout retrospective, but now will not be. Now last week, of course, we played Wipeout Pure and I talked about how I'd spent a decent chunk of time playing Wipeout Pure for the PSP for the first time around this time. Around this time of my life. I don't know how else to say that. Recently. That's the word I'm looking for. Recently. Sorry, you know when basic English fails you? You know when the only language that you speak fails you? Yeah, that's the kind of day I'm having. Anyway, yeah, so I never played the PSP games as a kid, but I played a whole bunch of Wipeout Pure recently, and that's kind of what inspired this retrospective, if that is indeed what we are calling these things. But I haven't played a lot of Wipeout Pulse, and I meant to, but instead I leapfrogged ahead to one that we're going to be playing soon, the Omega Collection. And so it's been interesting to go back to Wipeout Pulse and play it now, and see kind of like the original version of this game and these tracks specifically that I've already seen more high definition versions of in Omega Collection. Also, having become a little bit more used to Wipeout Omega Collection, I found it a little jarring to be playing Wipeout Pulse because the controls, I think it's just because of the way that I'm playing the game. I feel like there's some input lag happening potentially, but the controls feel more jarring, they feel more you know, they feel a little bit less smooth, is what I'm trying to say. But that's not saying, oh, Wipeout Pulse controls worse than Wipeout Pure, not at all. It's just, you know, it's just because I stopped playing the older games and jumped ahead into the future. As far as Wipeout Pulse versus Wipeout Pure is concerned, yeah, I was kind of expecting to prefer Wipeout Pure just because I'd been playing it more. But I can see why Wipeout Pulse is the slightly more well-received game. I really like the tracks that are on offer. It does some fun things with like, you know, some anti-gravity sections where you get to race sideways, but also just in general, the game feels a little bit more tight, a little bit more polished than the previous one, most especially in the way that the game is structured in, like, you know, how it gives you tournaments and stuff like that. Whereas in Wipeout Pure, they just gave you a speed class and then they would give you Tournament 1, Tournament 2, and then continue onwards, getting faster and faster with the same tournaments again, but with a mixed up variation of track offerings. In this one, it's a lot more like it is in Wipeout Omega Collection. In fact, it's almost exactly the same as it is in Wipeout Omega Collection, and by that I mean the Wipeout HD portion of Wipeout Omega Collection, of course. Instead of a tournament of a whole bunch of courses you need to race back to back, instead you've got more of a, you know, choose your event style thing. Choose your event, try and get a gold medal in it, and then you can unlock more events which are to the side of that one. Events are not limited to single races. They also include things like other modes which have been included in previous games but have just never been part of the main campaign, such as time trials, speed laps, and zone, which I'm going to include at the end of this video because I think it's a really cool game mode in Wipeout, and I've yet to show it off. For those of you who do not know, the zone game mode basically puts you in a ship that cannot decelerate, or maybe that's the wrong way of saying it. Basically, you can't put the brakes on it. It can decelerate, you can crash into walls, but you'll be heavily penalized for doing so because you have a base health pool, and should it deplete, you blow up. And the aim is to get as far as you can, stay alive as long as you can, get as many points as you can by hitting boosts and stuff as well to make it more difficult for yourself as the acceleration ramps up higher and higher. It's a really fun mode, and I recently got the gold trophy in the Omega Collection for hitting, I think it's like zone 65 in Wipeout 2048. But yeah, I barely achieved it, and it was super adrenaline inducing. It was really fun. But yeah, as far as Wipeout Pulse goes, it's a solid sequel to Wipeout Pure, and I could easily see myself sinking plenty of time into this game if I had not already jumped ahead to its successors. Or I guess I should say its remake, because when I say Wipeout Omega Collection, I'm usually referring to the Wipeout HD aspect of that game, which is basically Wipeout Pure plus Pulse plus some additional stuff on the PS3 originally. Also, in this version of Wipeout, you are able to set the AI difficulty separately to the race speed. So I put these guys up to medium even though we were on the lowest. By the way, this is the lowest racing speed, which feels like a step up from Pure's lowest racing speed. And yeah, they were a little bit meaner Hopefully that made for some more engaging gameplay footage because I didn't just win every time. Anyway, that's Wipeout, but this week I've been playing a racing game of a much slower variety. I re-downloaded Forza Motorsport for the first time since I uninstalled it after gaming my fill after it first released. Honestly, I don't think much has changed with that game. I did notice you can now skip practice from the main menu when you enter a race for the first time, so you don't have to enter practice, then press pause, then press skip practice and feel like you're missing out on a fundamental part of a game. Now it does feel more optional, and I have been doing it and playing through the campaigns in Forza Motorsport without doing like the free practice laps at the start of each race has made the game feel significantly more fun to play. Like, I know there are going to be racing sim enthusiasts out there who are going to be like, what do you mean you skip the practice laps? How are you supposed to perform your best if you're skipping the practice laps? But honestly, I typically just want to get down to the racing. I also played just one so far, but a multiplayer match, which I have done in the past, but it just reminded me how much fun Forza Motorsport is to play online. I don't tend to play these kinds of racing games online, and I should do more often because you know, it's as thrilling coming in like the middle of the pack in, you know, online racing as it is like finishing first in offline racing, because you know, anything could happen. It's not like the AI are going to randomly crash into a wall and end up at the back of a race. It's not like you feel the need to be really on guard with not hitting other cars around you like in single player like you would be in online. And also you can't rewind, or I think you can, but it just obviously rewinds you and gives you a massive disadvantage, so it's a little bit more I guess not stressful, but a little bit more engaging in that way of like, I can't mess up. So I might do some more online racing with Forza Motorsport. That could be fun. I've also just in general been continuing my spree of just, you know, trying lots of different games. Obviously it started off with me trying lots of different MMOs, but as you'll no doubt have noticed with the frequency of miscellaneous shenanigans videos in recent times, yeah, the bug of just like putting my fingers in a bunch of different pies has really taken hold of me. This week I decided to just download a few games off Game Pass because I feel like I'm severely underutilizing that service, and I decided to try out Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, which is a very fun Metroidvania game, and you can see some of my gameplay footage in the latest miscellaneous shenanigans if it so pleases you. Last week I also talked about purchasing Ratchet & Clank Size Matters for the PS4 against my better judgment, and streaming some of it over on the Dimension Jam channel. There are now 3 different VODs you can go and watch of my time streaming that game, but to give you the lowdown, to give you the cut and dry version of it, to give you the skinny on the dipping, as it were. As I was starting Ratchet & Clank Size Matters, I was like, oh, you know what? This is actually a solid title. I have severely misjudged this game. I'm having a really good time. It just feels like I'm playing another PS2 entry in a series, if a little bit underbaked. And then I kept playing Ratchet & Clank Size Matters, and oh my god, that game has an absurd difficulty spike. I'm not sure why, but like, I've been keeping my weapons upgraded, I've been getting the armor upgrades, I've been making sure I'm wearing all the armor upgrades, but it's getting to the point where like, enemies are taking so many hits to die, and it just takes 2 hits from these enemies to kill me. And so yeah, I'm remembering why Ratchet & Clank Size Matters is not a good Ratchet & Clank game. And, you know, while I might not have been able to formulate this opinion in quite this critical sense as a kid, as an adult, I can now look at it and say, it's because the difficulty scaling was all over the place. I have a theory that, like, a chunk of the middle of that game was cut, because at one point you get 2 gadgets from one, like, you know, mission. You get like 2 rewards from one mission, and it's very suspect. It's like, they don't normally do that, and yeah, I think they probably cut part of the game and just put it in there. The last video game I'm going to talk to you about today, because I do have other things to talk about for once, is a small indie game you may have heard of called World of Warcraft. The pre-patch for World of Warcraft The War Within came out last week, and while I wasn't initially planning on, like, you know, dropping Final Fantasy XIV to go and play WoW, that is what eventually ended up happening. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to give it a go to see what, like, the warbands were all about. And sadly, I don't know if they fixed it yet, but the warband banks have been disabled, which I would argue is like half of the draw of warbands, but they've been disabled due to bugs. And yeah, I guess you don't want items going missing between your characters, right? But you can, you know, transfer currency between alts now, which is pretty cool. There's a new login screen, and I've got my camp of 4 characters just hanging out there looking pretty cool. It is weird seeing all the different characters from the different realms in one place, since you know, I used to have an Alliance realm and a Horde realm, and now they're all together and they're being friends, and I'm like, you guys were literally fighting together like a few expansions ago, or against each other I should say. More literally though, it's just kind of a mess in terms of ordering. I have literally 51 World of Warcraft characters, so yeah, when I say it's a little messy having them all in one place, I'm not joking around. But yeah, some reputations have also been consolidated to be account-wide, and in general it just makes the game feel really nice, even without the warband banks. There's just a sense of like, everything I do has a little bit more meaning because it's more for my account than it is for my individual characters. And yeah, as someone with 51 World of Warcraft characters, that matters to me. I've mostly just been spending this time taking advantage of the time running event, which is still active, where I mean, other people have done it faster, but as far as my method goes and as far as me doing it goes, I'm able to create a new character and get them from level 10, which is what you start at in that mode, to level 70, which is the current maximum level, within about 3 hours. So my vague plan is to try and get one of each class up to maximum level before the start of War Within. I don't want to force myself to do it and burn myself out, but I am already at 9 out of 13 characters. The only classes I need now are Hunter, Mage, Paladin, and Demon Hunter to max level. Oh, I forgot to add as well, one fun thing about the warbands change is they've also just made it so that you can pick up any non-class specific transmog on any of your characters as you run through dungeons and raids. So transmog collection just got much more efficient, and I ran Stormwind Stockades just to see what it was like, and yeah, I got a whole bunch of goodies which I would have otherwise have vendored, because mailing them to the specific alts and then equipping them and selling them was a whole thing that I couldn't be bothered to do. Anyway, that's enough video game talk. I would like to talk to you about books, because I like to read books, and I'm going to tell you what I've been reading lately, why I've paused what I'm reading lately, how I'm changing my reading behavior, and what I am currently reading. That sounds like a lot, but I promise you we'll get through it, just stay with me. So recently I picked up the Last Kingdom series by Bernard Cornwell, and I was reading that. I was having a really good time, and when I say the series I mean it was like the first 6 books. I think there's loads now, but it was like the first 6 books for £6. And I was reading it on Kindle, and I read the first book and I loved it, and I read the second book and I loved it, I read the third book, and partway through my attention span just went bloop. No, we don't care about this anymore. You can't focus on any of these words. It is not giving you the brain tinglies, and it's just going to be frustrating trying to wade through it before you allow yourself to read the next thing. I get super frustrated about being unable to finish books because it feels like they are just cluttering the back of my mind with their unfinishedness, if that makes sense. So in the past I have tried to force myself to finish these books, and what usually ends up happening is I can't, and my stubbornness just means I don't read anything for months at a time, because I'm telling myself I'm still reading that other book. This time around, what I've decided to do is write myself a short summary of what's been happening in the book, and you know, because there are synopses online, but I don't know if there are chapter by chapter synopses online. I don't want to rely on that stuff. So like, just in terms of like the way I remember the story, write it down in my notes app under like a pinned note that says like paused stories, and then just like say stop being stubborn, go start something else. And that is what I have done. And the idea is that when it next, you know, tickles my fancy to go and continue the Last Kingdom series, I will do. I will be able to look at my phone and go, what was happening again? And continue it from there. This kind of ties in with what I decided to read next, because I have the Live Ship Traders trilogy by Robin Hobb sitting on my bookshelf looking at me admonishingly. That's not a word. With admonishment, there we go. Because I started Ship of Magic, the first book in the series, long ago, and I really liked what I read. And then I stopped, because ADHD lol. I have read the previous trilogy, the Farseer trilogy it is known as. It's also known as, I guess, like the Assassin's Quest series, probably, because that's kind of a name of those books. And they are some of my favourite fantasy books I've ever read, and I was super excited to continue reading through these kind of like self-contained but sequel trilogies and see where that universe goes. But I knew I'd have to wait a decent amount of time, because you don't want to like start reading a book that you've started before and like half remember the events, because then that's going to take you out of it even faster. So it's got to have been a good 3 or 4 years, if not more, since I last attempted this, and I'm absolutely loving it so far, and I am gonna try and, you know, read at least a trilogy at a time. But also I looked up a synopsis of what happened in the first trilogy, because I couldn't remember much of it, and you know what, that was enough to jog my memory to feel like I just read it the other day. So all is not lost. I think I need to trust in you know, synopsis checking for old books and stuff, instead of getting paranoid about forgetting everything and having to start over and not having the attention span to start over and then continue, etc. So that is my new approach to books. It's funny because this is a similar kind of thing I did with Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn trilogy long ago. I read that trilogy, I absolutely loved it, and I saw that it had a sequel trilogy, and I went, okay, I'm going to go read something else before I dive into the sequel trilogy, because I fancy a little change despite loving what I just read. And so now it's been years since I read the Mistborn trilogy, and I don't really remember what happened in that. I'm going to have to go and look up a synopsis. I said to myself, I'm going to go read the entirety of A Wheel of Time first, so I can read like the next thing Brandon Sanderson wrote, if I remember right, which was the last 3 Wheel of Time books. Good job, me. What a sensible idea. For those keeping track on the channel, I am at the start of the first Brandon Sanderson Wheel of Time book, and guess what happened? I'll give you a prize. I got distracted. I'm also reading Encyclopedia Eorzea, but let's not worry about that. Anyway, my throat is getting dry, and my voice is starting to fail me because I have yammered on for so very long. So, thank you very much for tuning in. This has been Wipeout Pulse. Next week we will be back with more Wipeout of another variety, and I will see you then. I hope you had an excellent week, and I hope your next week is even